700 years ago, a genetic mutation enabled a small group of human beings to survive a deadly disease. In the middle of the 14th century, the plague swept rapidly through Europe, killing 25 million people. That's a third of the population in just 4 years. But a small group of people managed to survive the deadly virus.
There was a small subset of people, less than 1%, who did not get plague, and they would survive no matter how bad the plague outbreaks were. About 300 years later, the number of these people had actually increased to about 10%. These people actually had a mutation that made them resistant to the plague bacteria. And later, so many years later, of course, these people increased because they were oftentimes the only survivors of the plague outbreaks.
The last great outbreak of plague occurred in the 17th century. In 1665, the Black Death struck London, taking 75,000 victims in its wake. In September of that year, George Vickers, a tailor in the small village of Eyam, received a parcel of cloth from London. It was ridden with plague-infected fleas. 4 days later, Vickers was dead. After many villagers succumbed at an alarming rate, the rector of the village made the momentous decision to quarantine the whole community. It was an heroic and radical act, and prevented disease spreading to the surrounding district. But a year later, when the first outsiders ventured into Eyam, they were surprised to find that nearly half the townsfolk had actually survived. Now descendants of these survivors are helping researchers battle a modern-day plague. From previous work undertaken on HIV/AIDS, researchers had isolated a gene known as CCR5. When this gene is active, it allows the HIV virus to penetrate white blood cells, thus spreading the virus through the body. But in people who have the mutation, the HIV virus just can't get into the white blood cells. When researchers analysed the blood samples from Eyam descendants, they found an unusually high number of people carrying the mutated version of the gene. This mutation may be the reason so many townsfolk survived in 1665 and could hold a key to preventing AIDS. But positive mutations aren't always a matter of life and death. A remarkable mutation arose after human beings first domesticated the cow. Our ancestors were quick to discover that cow's milk was similar to human milk, and so was a good source of nutrition. But there was just one hitch. Only babies could digest it without problems. Once people grew up, they found drinking milk gave them stomach cramps and nausea. They had lactose intolerance, which means they could no longer break down the sugars in milk. This was the norm for the majority of the population. But a lucky few were able to carry on enjoying milk as they grew up. They had a new advantage, a helpful mutation which meant their lactose tolerance gene didn't switch off after childhood. Those with the new mutation thrived and may have been healthier than the rest. They certainly would have had stronger bones and teeth. They may have made more attractive mates and may even have had more children. So in populations where dairying became established, the new mutation slowly spread, enabling most people to enjoy drinking milk throughout their lives. And this new taste for cow's milk wasn't just confined to human beings.
Cats probably developed the ability to break down lactose along with humans as we domesticated cattle and started using milk as a food source. Cats that could break down lactose probably did a lot better than the cats that couldn't.
But this mutation was mainly helpful in northern European cultures, where dairying became the norm. But in cultures that didn't drink a lot of milk, the mutation simply didn't take hold. And even today, the majority of Africans and Asians are still lactose intolerant. They carry the original version of the gene.